Can a trade agreement between the European Union and the United States really boost both economies and create more jobs on both sides of the Atlantic? To reach the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, will the EU need to compromise its strong policies on product safety, labor rules, and environmental protection? Hello and welcome to People First, the EPP Group's monthly program on issues with impact on people like you. Joining us to answer some of your questions is Daniel Kaspari. You're a member of the International Trade Committee here in the European Parliament and a member of the EPP Group. Mr. Kaspari, after 9 rounds of TTIP negotiations, where do we stand now and when? That's the big question. When are we going to have an accord?
First of all, I think even having 9 rounds of negotiations now over, we are still at the very beginning of the negotiations process. There are still many open questions.
Indeed.
And in those trade negotiations, always safety, security is more important than speed. And when will it be finished? We hope we see a result next year, but again, the content is more important than the timing.
Indeed. Well, before we go to further detail on that, let's take a look at our report, which does look at more of the details on this TTIP negotiation. The pressure is building on all sides of the EU-US trade issue. Proponents say there needs to be an agreement this year on TTIP before the US presidential election campaign heats up, if it hasn't already. Opponents want the talks scuttled, saying they're a backdoor way to soften EU regulations on data protection, health and safety, labor and environmental protection, among others. The benefits could be enormous, a full 0.5% boost in both economies' gross domestic product, or GDP. And it would help make both economies more competitive in an increasingly competitive global economy. At the same time, consumers would enjoy a cheaper and wider range of goods and services. And with this agreement, the EU and US will have the chance to be standard makers, not standard takers, from fast emerging economies. A TTIP agreement would in effect create a trading zone making up more than 30% of the world's trade. At a time of rising emerging economies challenging established ones, proponents say it's high time for a trade agreement with Europe's largest trading partner. Now to see if negotiators can get through the devilish details and overcome sometimes intense opposition on both sides by reassuring them it's a win-win proposition. So a win-win proposition, but there are some sticking points here. What are a couple of those sticking points?
First of all, we have to make sure that we don't lower our standards, but we get market access on the other hand. Second is the United States feel very difficult in opening up their public procurement markets, where our European companies are very competitive. Then our farmers ask for more access for some specific goods, for instance in the dairy sector. If you look in a shop in the United States, the products there are definitely different and most of all from a lower quality than our Europeans. Then the question of transport within the United States. Do our companies get better access to the transport market in the US? Still many open points.
Sounds like a lot of sticking points there. But let's go to our first Vox Pop question, and what's on the minds of a lot of people is jobs.
Bonjour, je suis Neige, je suis de Bruxelles et je voudrais savoir ce que le TTIP allait changer par rapport à l'emploi.
Okay, well that seems to be the key issue. Not only job creation, but the quality of jobs that would be created by TTIP. Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, the main problem is, of course, estimates are only estimates, but definitely if you see our jobs in Europe at the moment, then you can see that normally the better off jobs are those which are close to globalization and close to export. We see, of course, that our companies who are active in global markets, they have higher employment growth than those companies who aren't. And overall, it also makes existing jobs more safe because competition in global market becomes tougher and tougher. We can see upcoming countries like China or India, which make life difficult. And so a transatlantic marketplace could help us making jobs safer, create new jobs, but the figures, that's always difficult because that depends on the models. Yes.
It's an estimate. But what about prices too? That's another question that a lot of people had.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Bader, je suis de l'Italie. Je voudrais poser une question à propos des produits bio qu'on achète ici. Et je veux savoir si après cet accord, les produits vont augmenter du prix.
Okay, well, some people have this theory that you might have big companies coming in, crushing smaller companies, then raising their prices. Do you see that scenario?
My scenario is more that the bigger companies, they can deal with different standards, with different rules on both sides of the Atlantic. I think the bigger companies, they are already active. Of course, an agreement could also improve their situation, yes, but those companies who benefit most are especially small and medium-sized companies, because then they know the rules, they have perhaps one rule they have to keep to. Especially our farmers, in most of the cases, are small and medium-sized enterprises.
Okay. Now, in our talking to different people on the street, we talked to an American who had this question. It's a twist on what people have been talking about, the impact of that agreement, but on the state side.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm from California. I just recently moved here, and I'm wondering if these talks are going to force the Americans to get tougher on their own regulations regarding pesticides and GMOs.
Okay, well, that's an interesting theory. Everybody talks about how maybe the Europeans might be forced to compromise, but what about the Americans? They might be forced to compromise and come closer to some of the tough regulations the Europeans have. Is that possible?
Yeah, exactly. That's the strange thing in the public debate. The Europeans are afraid of lowering standards because of the US, and the US are afraid about lowering their standards because of us. And I think in most of the cases, standards are not higher or lower on one side of the Atlantic, they are just different.
Different.
Yeah, and so the question is, how can we make sure that we keep up higher standards? And talking to business and companies, I often got the message, please make one joint standard, which is even perhaps higher than the existing ones on both sides of the Atlantic, but then you only have to produce one product for one market. You don't have to engineer and develop two products for two markets, and which can help them increasing production cost. And on the other hand, we even higher standards. So I think TTIP could be a chance not to reduce standards, but even to higher standards in the transatlantic market. And in those areas where we are having different views, for instance, some Europeans have problems with chlorinated chicken, but the United States have problems with some milk products. So, for instance, raw milk cheese, which we like and they don't. I think when two democracies are negotiating with each other, we definitely won't harm citizens. We want to create opportunities where possible, and we will keep things as they are where necessary.
So product safety is going to be number one, right?
Sure, we don't want to punish people, and we don't want to make people angry. We want to help the people.
Right. Back around to the first main issue that so many people are asking about, jobs.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Robert, mais je ne vois absolument pas pourquoi, comment ça va procurer de l'emploi, quoi.
So, a skeptic among others, can we really create hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of jobs from a TTIP?
Yeah, again, the figures, I think that's unclear according to the model, but definitely trade helps us securing and creating jobs. When you see those areas and those sectors of our economies where jobs have been created in the last years, then it were exactly those sectors where we took part in the global markets. And creating TTIP means more competition, it means more safety in this transatlantic market. It creates new opportunities for our businesses and therefore, of course, more jobs. But the amount, I think that's a debate which we shouldn't do.
Let me take it from the other angle is, what if we don't have a TTIP? What would be the problem there?
The problem is that we are facing the situation that other countries like the Chinese, like the Indians and others trying to set up their standards. They are trying to compete with lower quality products, and creating a transatlantic market, creating this TTIP, that would definitely help us in facing those challenges seeing in the globalization. Because we have to not only take part in globalization, we have to shape in globalization, and that's what TTIP should be about.
That's what I think the negotiators hope to accomplish. Let's see if they do that. Daniel Kaspari, thank you very much for joining us. And that's it for now on People First. Find out more about the activities of the largest political force in Parliament by checking eppgroup.eu. Until next time, thanks for watching.